Hi, this is Erma Grego from Senior Perspective. We have seen a lot of changes in Peters Township, but today we are talking to one of our longtime residents who has a business here in the township. I would like to introduce George Matyas.
Thank you, Erma. Glad to be on the show today.
Can you tell us why you chose to do barbering?
Well, Erma, it's a long story. I remember the days when I was a lad and my dad would take me to a barbershop and I would enjoy my first lollipop. And he says, son, he says, someday you might be a barber. And I said, no way. I wanted to be a fire truck driver or a truck driver. Well, through the years, I went through grade school, graduated high school. World War II was heavy. In 42, I went to the military, came back, worked at McGraw-Edison, met my wife Helen there, got married in 49. And she said, don't you think we should have some added income? And it was too late to go to college. So we decided on going to barber school. And that's how the choice was made. It was through my wife Helen, and you know Helen as well, because you're a longtime friend of yours.
Right. Okay. Where did you go to school?
Well, I went to school in Pittsburgh. It was called the Pittsburgh Barber School. While I was working at McGraw-Edison, I would leave the shop at 4 o'clock and ride to Pittsburgh with some of the employees that lived there, and went to school there till 11 in the evening and caught the last bus back. And it was a hectic schedule, but it was well worth it. And the school was known as the Pittsburgh Barber School.
Okay, well, can you tell us a little bit about the school?
Yes, the school was down on Smithfield Street near Kaufman's, and then we moved up to Federal Street on the north side. And it was funny. We took theory and practical barbering, and I was always fearful of when I would do my first shave. But the way they did it then, they blew up a balloon, and they latherized the balloon. And you learn to glide the razor over the balloon instead of cutting into the balloon. Well, if you cut into the balloon, you had that lather all over yourself. So in due time, after several balloons were broken, you got to use the razor. And the hair cutting, they did start you with a hand clipper, basically, and you graduated to the electric clipper. And the courses were 4 hours each evening, and I enjoyed it very much.
George, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your building, about your shop.
Well, thanks, Erma. I'd be glad to. This building that you see behind us at one time was a miniature stable, or barn, if you might say, and it was up the valley here about, 500 feet, and it was owned by the McMurrays. My father-in-law, George Baird, was a small-time farmer at the time, had a little cow stable, which you can see, though you can't see it from here, but it's in the next building. And then he brought this building down a 15-foot alley and rolled it down on big telephone logs and built a concrete foundation and put the building here. And he used it as a pig stable, believe it or not. He raised some hogs and butchered. And after I married his daughter, Helen, and I was going to barber school, he says, George, he says, you know, someday you might be able to use that as a barbershop. Never in my mind did I think that would ever transpire. So as time went on, and I went to barber school, I decided, well, maybe that was a good idea. So at that time, we were to strike at McGraw-Edison. I had 6 months to do it, and of course, that's how long the strike lasted. And I had help from neighbors and cousins and friends, and we remodeled this building here. And in fact, down at the hollow of the road was a barber supply company. It was operated by Herman Bennett and Anthony Williams. And they supplied me with a leftover insole brick because at that time aluminum siding was coming in and this inventory was left over, and he practically gave it to me for a song. And of course I gave him some free haircuts after that. And I did that, and on the inside the building was put together with pins and hard lumber. You couldn't drive a nail into it. So my wife Helen and I built artificial 2x4 studding, and her cousin was a plasterer, and he said, you put the plasterboard on and I'll come plaster the place. So we did that. We put the plasterboard on. He came over to do the job, and he laughed. He says, I can't plaster this. You put the plaster on the wrong side. So no way were we going to take the plaster off. So he said, I'll tell you what you can do. I'll make you some rakes with nails in. And he pounded some sticks with nails in. He says, now spend a couple days scratching this thing, and when you got it all scratched, call me back. That's what we did. We scratched it down, and he came back and plastered it. A cousin of mine wired it, and as you see, I have brought all my utilities underground. Of course, gas and water did come underground. Since that was underground, I decided to put electric under the ground, so there's no lines coming out here. And on the inside, my brother-in-law, Phil Fike, made my work stand, and he was assistant manager of Finleyville Planing Mill at the time, and he put in the windows for me and the door, and slow but sure, the linoleum was bought at Finleyville Furniture. It's still the same linoleum. They don't make them like that anymore. There's hardly any wear to it, you can see. And slow but sure, it turned out to be a barbershop, and my father-in-law's dream came true, and it became one of my dreams. Thank you.
Oh, that's really a wonderful story, and it takes a lot of people to do something like that in order to get something started. And you were very fortunate to have all the help you had. Now, when did you first open your shop? And do you remember your first customer?
Yes, Erma, I was the first barber in Peters Township, and it was a plus for me because at that time, this residence and this barbershop were the only things along, and the school was the only thing along McMurray Road. There was no barbers in the township. Of course, there were some barbers that were underground barbers, we sort of called. They had no license, but the people that wanted professional haircuts went to Cannonsburg, Bridgeville, Finleyville. So I built this shop, and it opened up in April 10th, 1954. And one of my first customers was my wife's grandfather. I promised him to be the first customer. And he sat in that chair, and tears just rolled down his eyes that he saw my dream come through. And he's been deceased quite a few years now, but I have a picture of him, and he took it home and he framed it. And through the years, I've had all of my customers come here, and some of them are still living, but we'll talk about that more later.
I know that you've done my son's hair, and he was one of your customers. I'd like to ask you something here in the shop now. Are some of your customers still living?
Yes, Erma. I've made friendship with a lot of my customers. I think I mentioned Johnny Houston. He's in his 90s. He still comes to the barbershop, and he can see good and he can hear good. A very nice conversationalist, and he's become a lifelong friend of mine. Then there's gentlemen like Bob Matthews, Ed Mayland. The list just goes on and on, but I've become friends of theirs, and they've become friends of me. We don't consider each other as barber and customers relationship, and I've enjoyed it all through the years. And the different fellows here, after they would get their haircuts, in this day and age, we've lost the neighborhood communications. It seems like today we meet each other at a funeral home or at a wedding, very seldom in church, and more often in a barbershop. So when they come to the barbershop, after their haircut, they'll see Mr. So-and-so walk in. Well, I'm not leaving. I'm going to gab with him for a while. So he stays here, and they have a little bull session. And I don't have the spittoon here, but they still enjoy talking about yesteryear and how the township has progressed and the pluses and minuses of it. And they talk about the old 3 supervisors. Of course, we've gone to the home rule situation now. So there's all kind of subjects being talked here. Of course, lately, the O.J. case, is he guilty, is he innocent? We resolve a lot of problems inside, but they never come to be a fact on the outside. So the conversation here is very interesting and enjoyable by me and by patrons.
From yesteryear to today.
Right.
Okay, are you taking any new customers now?
No, Erma, I've retired in 1985 from Cooper Industries, which was formerly Pennsylvania Transformer Company, then McGraw-Edison. And I'm not taking any new customers, and all I'm doing now is my senior citizens, and I think I've been obligated to keep cutting their hair because, truthfully, they tell me there's nowhere else to go. In the interim, I've had 2 broken hips and 2 hip replacements, and that meant being away from the shop at each interval, maybe 4 to 5 months. Well, they were so glad that when I got back on my feet, they came back. Usually when a barber's off that length of time, your customer will find someone else and stay with him. Well, maybe I'd say 5% did, but the majority of them still wanted George to cut their hair. They liked their white sidewalls. They didn't want none of this hairstyling. And I never did get into hairstyling for the simple reason I would have to go to seminars. And I quit cutting children's hair for the simple reason that they've gone to long hair, Dawn Eagles, you name it, through the years. And there's no way I was going to be in a part-time. Had I been full-time, I might have considered going to seminars, learning how to do different hair cutting. But I'm still an old-fashioned barber, and some of them call me the community butcher.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that. But, you know, it's good to have somebody that is still interested in doing things the way you used to do them. On that subject, what was the price of your first haircut?
Well, Erma, at that time, my haircut was $1.25 for adults and $1 for children. Then as the years went by, I increased it to the point where it's still not high today. It's still a bargain. Although I give the senior citizens a $1 discount, and very few customers of mine are not senior citizens, so they pay the full price, which is $5, and for the senior citizens, it's $4. But you know, the senior citizens feel guilty. Each one of them throws a $5 bill at me, and nobody waits for the dollar change. So you can say my price tag is $5 all around.
How did you happen to, how'd you get your supplies when you were so busy?
Well, Erma, at that time, beauty shops were very extinct. A lot of the women did their own hair at home, and barbershop was the thing for the gentlemen. Well, at that time, I didn't have an automobile, and how was I going to get my barber supplies? Well, there used to be barber supply men that would come around with their panel trucks and give you barber supplies for your use, and also to set up a little stand in your shop on a consignment basis. So I tried that, and then on top of that, I would take a bus into Pittsburgh on Sunday and go into the wholesale houses, and I thought I'd have a little extra business going along with my barbershop. So I'd buy shoestrings, flints, little combs, shoe polish, something that a man would buy just off the counter reaching for it instead of making a special trip to a store to get it. And that didn't fare so well. The inventory lasted too long for the profit to be profitable. So I just didn't do that anymore. And I quit that, and I just stuck to my barber supplies. Now, if anybody wanted tonic, as you see on the sign, Wildwood Barber Tonic, that was a very popular thing at one time. And I had quite a few customers that really liked it. And I would order it for them from the barber supply man. Now, today, there is no barber supply man, so there's one place left in Crafton, Pennsylvania, and I just called him 2 weeks ago to get barber supplies, a few that I need. And to my knowledge, when I picked up the phone and talked to him, he went out of business. So my only salvation now to get a few supplies that I need is a barber supply house in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, or one from Richmond, Virginia. So the few supplies I get, I order from them. But the thing is, my supplies don't come to a great amount of money. I have to have a $50 order. So it takes quite a while for me to order a supply, and a UPS usually delivers it.
Wasn't there a barber supply in Washington?
Yes, Erma, there was, but within the last year, they went out of business now, too. And everything in Washington now and Canonsburg or in the surrounding areas, all beauty supplies. So all the barbers today have to order theirs through the mail order house.
Okay, how about telling us some of your experiences? I'm sure you have a ton of them.
Yes, Erma, I had quite a few experiences. Well, let's start off first of how I happened to get this chair that I'm sitting in. At that time, there was a barbershop going out of business in Washington, and they had an auction. So I took my daughter with me. She was a freshman in high school. And we went up to buy this chair in the auction. And do you know that everything in the barbershop was auctioned and the chairs were last? And he had 3 chairs. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning that this already transpired. It started about 8 o'clock. And there was 3 of us barbers there bidding on these chairs. So we got together and Said, "Was no use cutting each other's throat. Let's hold our price down. We're all going to wind up with a chair." So we held our price down, and I got this chair for a $20 bill. But then my experiences in this chair here, I remember vividly at one time, a dad brought his son in for a haircut. Of course, the dad wanted the son to have a short haircut. Well, the son, he's about 12 years old at that age. No more short haircuts for him. He wanted a long haircut. So I'm proceeding to cut his hair, and he already knows the way I'm cutting that it's going to be a short one. And he said, "Dad, I told you I wanted a long one." He gets out of the chair with a cloak tied around him and starts out towards the street, and his dad after him. Well, he looked like Batman or Superman with the cloak waving, and his dad caught up to him, and he brought him back, and his dad more or less stood around the chair and made sure he didn't vacate it again, and I finished the job. But that puts a barber in the middle. When a youth comes in, he wants this kind of haircut, the parent is paying for it, and you hear them arguing, and the dad says, "Well, whenever you can pay for your own haircut, you can get what you want, but now you're going to get what I want you to have." And another experience I've had, too, is I've never had the opportunity of cutting a man's hair with a toupee or a wig. In other words, us barbers called it a mop. This gentleman came in, and he said he'd like to have a haircut. And he was the president of one of the big companies here in Peters Township. I don't want to mention his name because it would be embarrassing. He doesn't live here anymore. But when he comes back to the area, he comes and visits me. But anyhow, he took his toupee off. He says, "Now, George," he says, "I want a haircut that doesn't look like a haircut. My fringes, I just have a little hair. I just want you to play with your shears a little bit so that when I put my toupee on, it will blend." Because he remembered going to one barbershop, and a barber just skinned him, and when he put his wig on, he looked like a sight. So, fortunately, I guess I was successful. After I played around with the shears a little bit and cut his hair, he put his wig on, stood in front of the mirror, and he liked it very much. And from there on, I was his only barber, because he... So where he's getting his hair now, I don't know. He resides in Virginia, and when he's back in the area, he always stops in. So, of course, I guess he has found somebody that gives him a haircut, because I don't make no trips down to Virginia.
No, you're not going that far then, are you? George, maybe you could tell us the difference from the barbershops of yesteryear to the ones of today?
Irma, I'd be glad to. Well, you know, yesteryear the barber used a hand clipper, and then as time went on, you got the automatic clipper. Today the barbershops have lost a lot of business due to the reason that home hair cutting equipment has come into effect. Then came the Gillette razor, and they did away with the straight razor, so the men start shaving at home with Gillette razors and what have you. And of course, we're up to the stage now where you have electric shavers. So that makes today's barbershop extinct as far as shaving is concerned. I remember yesteryear, the old saying used to be shaving a haircut 2 bits. Well, you can't even open up the barbershop door for 2 bits now. And the women, the men today are going to women's beauty shops. It seems like the barber trade is being lost. Yesteryear, it was, my dad was a barber, my son's going to be a barber. Your dad was a shoemaker, the boy was going to grow up to be a shoemaker. Well, with education and society as it is today, it doesn't seem to be like father, like son anymore. Everybody goes their own way. So since the yesteryear barbershop has fallen apart, it seems like the old guard, the old senior citizens are having a hard time finding a conventional barbershop such as what we're sitting in today. And the younger generation are going to beauty shops where the man, well, maybe he likes a woman cutting his hair. I don't know why they go there, but they don't pay $5. They pay $11, $12, and they get a shampoo and a blow dry on their hair, and they don't mind spending $20 to $25. But it only lasts 2 weeks, not even that, and they're back again. Well, I think the gentlemen like my haircuts in the yesteryear barbershop, because when I give a haircut, I think it lasts a month. Not that I want them to come back sooner, but that's the kind that they like. They're from the old school. So those are some of the differences in yesteryear's barbershop and today's remaining barbershops and up-and-coming beauty shops.
Okay, I understand you still cut some hair free of charge. Could you comment on that, please?
Yes, Erma. One of the reasons I thought that I didn't want to be a full-time barber was that after I had a family of my own, I might have 3 or 4 boys. Well, it would be a savings through life just to cut their hair and the neighbor's hair and so forth. Well, during the years, I had 3 girls and 1 boy. I used to cut my boys' hair. And the girls got married. I got son-in-laws. They're from Wisconsin, Colorado, Ohio. When they come around, their haircuts are free. Of course, time went on. They got families. I got grandchildren and about 4 boys. And they enjoy free haircuts. So, and another thing I do too is I feel obligated to my senior citizens. Whenever one of them breaks a leg or is hospitalized or becomes incapacitated at a bedridden at home, my little suitcase gets filled up with my tools and away I go, free of charge to cut their hair. They feel obligated that they don't want it free of charge. So they'll say, well, here's for your gas money anyhow. There's no use you coming here and cut my hair. Well, what I do is I go out and spread a newspaper down, and I clean up after I cut the hair. And if they're able to come back, they come back. If not, I continue to cut their hair until such time when they go to the great beyond.
That's wonderful that you do something like that, and more people should be more considerate of people that are incapacitated and that, and they wouldn't have less to worry about. So how long do you plan on cutting hair?
Well, Erma, I'm 72 years old now, and I started cutting hair in '54. That makes, 41 years that I've been cutting hair? And I don't think I'll be cutting hair for 41 more, but as long as God gives me the power to be able to cut hair, my 2 hips don't bother me. I have 2 replacements, although I've accumulated emphysema through the years. And Saturday mornings when I open up at 9 o'clock, I have to get up about 6:30. In fact, I did that early today. In order to get my rhythm back in my breathing, I have to take my morning puffs on inhalators. I'm not on oxygen. Fortunately, I hope I don't have to. And by 9 o'clock, I'm ready to go. So today, when your television crew came and you came, I was ready to go. But I was up at 6:30, had my breakfast, had my puffs. I call them puffs. And as long as I'm able to cut hair, not that I actually have to, I'm not a millionaire. There's no use trying to start being one now. The extra money I get, well, maybe we can go to McDonald's and have a hamburger, or we go out to eat somewhere, you know. And so I've been blessed with a wonderful family, a wonderful wife, and able to use my talent in some small way for the community.
Well, that's wonderful, and I think that you have done a great job in keeping this little shop going in that, and I'm sure that more people would be better off if they could continue doing some of their hobbies in that and really profit by it. So thank you, George, very, very much for your time, and I'm sure we all enjoyed listening to your experiences from being a barber in Peters Township. This is Erma Grego from Senior Perspective.